Hey everyone, Art Burns here. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. I am so excited to be here with you because I have a really special story to share with you today. I was originally going to talk today about non-judging awareness and how it relates back to what we talked about yesterday, which was non-identification and how that impacts the empathic resonance that we all are giving off all the time, whether we know it or not, and so how that all kind of ties together. But I have an even better topic today. And so we're going to push the non-judging awareness back a day or two, maybe even a couple days. And it's all going to tie together, I promise you. I really like planning these videos as like 5 video segments, sort of, so that between Monday and Friday, you're going to notice a little bit of a theme that kind of, ties all together. So some weeks I do better than others on this, but I do try. And so today, though, I'm pulling a little bit of an audible, right? Like I'm changing the plan at the last minute, and there's a reason for this, okay? Number one, I try to be flexible with these videos as much as I can because you never know what's going to come up. Sometimes I might read something or something will occur to me, the morning that I'm about to do the video. So sometimes I do shift it up. But today there's a specific reason for this, okay? And I owe this gratitude for the story today to Facebook, ironically, and specifically the Facebook memories. Now, there's a lot of things that I don't think are awesome about Facebook, but there's one thing that I really, really do love, and they do this really well. So any Facebook designers or engineers listening, we need more of the memories. These things are just beautiful. So every day or whatever, I think it's every day, you'll get this memory that pops up in your Facebook feed. And I just love these things. I really, really do. It's like a little snapshot from where you were. This one's from 5 years ago, and so they're little snapshots from where you were at these other times in your life, and sometimes they're just so beautiful. Like you can get back into some really beautiful moments through the memory, and this is really, really wonderful. And I love that Facebook does this. So good job on the memories, Facebook. Keep it up, kiddos. But today I want to tell a story about. It's actually a story about forgiveness. It really is, and a story about forgiveness and kindness and compassion and altruism and generosity and even gratitude. And the reason I want to say this, I think it's a really appropriate. Today is the first day of the last month of probably the most difficult and challenging year that any of us can remember. In fact, if we, some of our grandparents might not even remember a year that's more difficult than this one. Now, my grandparents lived through the Great Depression, so they would probably challenge me on this, and I believe they experienced the Spanish flu as well. Like that would have been, my grandmother was probably a little girl at that point. So certainly there is not precedent that some of our older, elders of our families would be able to share, more difficulty than what we're experiencing. But aside from the Great Depression, I can't think of much else. Sure, it was hard to live through World War II and stuff, I'm sure. Anyway, the point is that I think it's a really beautiful concept to kind of use this last month of this year, especially with the holidays, coming up, whatever holiday you practice and celebrate on your own, at this time of year, virtually every religion, every philosophy, every culture has a big deal kind of holiday at this time of year. And I don't think that's any mistake, right? Like winter time's a time where we kind of all come together. We want to, as much as we can come together during COVID-19, of course, but we have this tendency to sort of hunker down and stay warm together and kind of, share each other's time. And so as we go into this season of sharing each other's time with us and giving gifts and receiving gifts and all that love that goes with it, I think it's a really great time to sort of pay attention to gratitude and kindness and forgiveness and compassion and altruism and generosity, right? These are all really important things for ourselves, right? They're really, really good for us, okay? Not in a spiritual sense, not only in a spiritual sense, but in a medical, physical sense. We are better off, we are healthier if we are more generous, more altruistic, more forgiving, more compassionate and kinder, right? That's a fact, right? Or at least it's as close as scientists come to saying something is a fact. It's very, very well accepted through a lot of research that shows medically that this works for us, okay? And so today I'm going to talk about forgiveness, and then throughout the week we're going to talk about some of the other things like generosity, altruism, compassion, and so on. But today I'm going to talk about forgiveness because, forgiveness is something that is honestly, it's widely, misunderstood in my opinion. I know the way that I used to view forgiveness was in a sense of, and I hear this from a lot of other people, so I know I wasn't alone in this, but forgiveness tends to be seen as, kind of a weakness, right? It's something where it's like, okay, if I forgive this person who did something to me that hurt me, right? Then what I'm doing is I'm giving them some kind of license to hurt me, right? Like it's almost like I'm rolling over and letting them just do it, right? Like I'm absolving them of any wrongdoing in their action that hurt me, and I'm kind of allowing them to do it again, right? That's kind of the sense that people get when they talk about forgiveness. And that's why I think a lot of people are very reluctant to offer forgiveness for others, right? But forgiveness that's not really what forgiveness is, right? Forgiveness actually takes a lot of strength, right? Because, as I talk about here a lot, that, as human beings, we are drawn towards the familiar, right? Even if that familiar is something that's painful and uncomfortable, we are drawn to that, right? And so the sense that we get when somebody's done us wrong, that sense of that grudge that we get, right? We have this tendency to believe, I feel, as human beings, we have this tendency to believe that if I can hold this grudge, if I can send these angry thoughts out to this person, then somehow I'm going to level the field somehow. I'm going to gain some sort of, vengeance and balance the books between me and this person. And they're going to get their comeuppance, right? And I get it, right? I get that. That's, understood, right? And I get that. But the problem is, and I learned this a very hard way, okay? And it's going to relate to the story I'm about to tell you. I learned this a really hard way, is that when we do that, right, when we hold that anger and we try to, kind of think like, okay, if I can just be angry enough at this person, somehow their life is going to suffer and I'm going to feel better because now they're going to hurt the way that they hurt me, right? I totally get it. But the fact of the matter is that, and again, I learned this the really difficult way. The fact of the matter is that person who you're thinking of, that object, that person who is the object of your anger, resentment, hate, vengeance, whatever you want to call it, right? They don't know that you're sitting there thinking about them, right? They're off out there living their life. They're having dinner with their spouse. They're playing with their kids. They're going to movies. They're going out to dinner. They're eating pizza. They're watching football. They're doing whatever they do, right? And your anger for them is not something they ever even know. And this is not just me talking about this, okay? There's a couple of major authors I would like to reference who both have really powerful quotes about this, okay? The first one is that old guy, the Buddha, right? And I mean, Jesus Christ will say this too, right? Jesus Christ talks about turning the other cheek, right? When somebody slaps you, you don't slap them back, you turn the other cheek, so that's kind of part of forgiveness, right? But the Buddha has a great saying that anger, right, which is what we feel when we're not forgiving someone, right? It relates back to that, although anger could be in different contexts, I guess. But he says that anger is like holding a hot coal in your hand with the intention of throwing it at somebody. Right? That's what we feel like, right? We feel like if I can just be angry enough at this person, then somehow that energy is going to get to them and they're going to suffer and they, again, get their comeuppance somehow, right? But what really happens is that your hand just gets blistered and damaged, and by the time you do see that person, you can't even throw the coal because you're so hurt, right? And so Mark Twain is another author who has a really fantastic quote about this, and I love to use this one. I tell this to all of my clients at some point or other. Mark Twain wrote, "Anger is an acid which does more damage to the vessel in which it is stored than to the person on whom it is poured. Right? Same concept of what the Buddha was talking about, right? That we, when we hold this in us, right, it damages us, right? And it's true, folks. It's true. It's actually borne out with, I'll tell you another really quick story here about a doctor. Don't recall the gentleman's name at this point. If you want to get this name, I can look through some of my research and send this to you. But there's a doctor who worked in the burn unit in New Orleans, right? You know, maybe about, I don't know when it was, like 10, 15 years ago or something like that. And for, you know, now when you're in the burn unit, right, there's a couple of really common denominators for people who wind up in a burn unit. Number one, they're very, very badly hurt, right? It's not the kind of thing where you just go to the emergency room, you get fixed up, and you go home, right? You know, if you're in the burn unit, that means that you have some very severe injury going on. That's, you know, like you're missing part of your skin, right? And it's always a big deal. The second thing, though, that's really interesting about the burn injuries, right, is that there's always someone at fault. There's always someone to blame, right? Either there was a safety mechanism or protocol that was not followed that resulted in someone getting hurt. That could be by an employer, that could be by the city or the state or what municipality of some sort, right? Or it was an absent-minded you know, silly or dumb mistake that someone made. So in almost every single case of a burn victim, there is someone to blame, either someone else or one's self. Okay, so this doctor down in New Orleans who was, and you know, there was like an aluminum plant nearby, so he saw some really gruesome injuries, right, as you know, in this burn unit, right. And what he did was, over the course of a couple of years, he you know, he worked with hundreds and hundreds of patients over these couple of years, and during these couple of years, he kind of did this, you know, it's not a very scientifically designed experiment. I mean, it wouldn't hold up in a scientific journal or anything. It was a little bit of anecdotal, as they call it, as opposed to empirical, right? And so, but for a couple of years, what he did was he interviewed all of his patients before treating them, right, or on that first day that he's starting to treat them, right? And what he did was he asked them all to consider offering forgiveness for whoever it was that caused this injury, even if that was themselves, right? And he made it clear, right, to all and this is a really important detail, okay, because this is where forgiveness, I think, sometimes gets a bad rap, but a very important detail. Each one of these people, okay, this doctor told them, forgiving this person who caused this to happen to you does not mean that you can't pursue legal damages. Does not mean that you can't even pursue criminal charges. Like, you can still press charges against this person. You can still sue them for how much you think that you should sue them for, or as much as you want to, right? That is not dependent on forgiveness. Those two things are mutually exclusive, right? Justice and forgiveness are mutually exclusive. Okay, and that's true for you and me too, right? Like, this is not something where, you know, forgiveness is not about, you know, letting people off the hook, right? It's more about what's happening to you, right? Like, just allowing yourself to put down this burden of that acid that's inside of us that's causing us so much pain, right? So this doctor, right, now this is the findings of his, you know, again, admittedly not very scientific research that he did, you know, but what he found was that over the course of a couple of years and hundreds of different patients who he worked with, that those patients, a lot of times when somebody is burned, one of the common, very, very common treatments for this, or procedures for this, is a skin graft, right? Where they take skin from another part of your body and they graft it onto the area that was burned, right? Because that's part of the problem with the burn. Your outer layers are just gone, right? And so what he found, okay, in hundreds of patients over a couple of years, he found that those patients who were unwilling to offer forgiveness to the person responsible for their injuries, right, they required 4 times the amount of skin graft attempts than those who agreed and willingly offered forgiveness to the people who were hurting them, right? Or who caused the problem that caused them to be burned, right? 4 to 1. Okay, that means that the people who were not forgiving, they would put a skin graft on, the body would reject it. They put another one on, the body would reject it again and again. 4 to 1. Okay, now there's a medical and scientific basis for this, right? When we hold a grudge for someone, right? We it's the same response in your body as stress, right? It's cortisol, it's adrenaline, it's the hyperarousal, it's the whole thing that happens in the stress response that I talk about here a lot, right? So therefore, when we're in that place of stress, right, we're in that survival mode, our bodies do not have the resources for healing themselves and for health, right? And that's why this skin graft thing happens, right? That it requires 4 times the amount of attempts to get a successful skin graft, right? Because and it's like every time you think of that person, right, who did something wrong to you, you're releasing more cortisol into your body, right? And of course, the way the human mind works, and I talk about this here a lot, right? We're very, very quick to tell stories and to think about things over and over and over again, right? So you might think about somebody who hurt you 30 or 40 times in a day, like easily. And so that means 30 or 40 times a day, you're getting into that stress response. And sooner or later, this becomes habit. This becomes kind of the way that we live, the nature of ourselves, right? And so then you're eventually you get into the habit of never forgiving anyone. And then you're in the habit of constantly thinking about the people for whom you're holding a grudge. And then you're in chronic stress, just like 77% of American adults that I tell you all the time. So anyway, before my time runs out here, let me tell you my story about forgiveness, okay? So up until a few years ago, for about 8 years, I ran a small cafe in the Hudson Valley in New York, okay? And it was a little bagel shop, so it was very, very difficult to run this business, but it was very, very rewarding, and I loved it. I really did. I loved the community aspect of it. I loved feeding people. I loved, people would bring their kids in. I'd be giving high fives all day. It was really, really very rewarding. However, it was extremely challenging as well, right? I mean, I used to have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was not an easy life. So anybody out there considering opening a bagel shop, it is great, but be ready for a lot of hard work, and I'll be happy to consult you on that if you'd like. But anyway, across the years, right, one of the challenges of running a business like that, right, especially a private, small cafe like that, right, not a chain that's a nationwide franchise kind of thing, right, the sort of employees that you get in these places are often very transient, right? And that might be true for chains too, but I think that they can offer, benefits and higher salaries and stuff like that. And so I tried to be as kind to people as I could. I mean, I was one of the people who paid more than most of the other places in town and all that kind of stuff. But still, you had plenty of times where people came in and they just they didn't show up one day and didn't call or anything. They just didn't show up, and it was really, really hard, So there was this one employee, this woman who worked for us. And it was so frustrating because I could tell that she got it. Like, she was smart, and she was humane, and she had a lot going for her, right? But she would always just flake out of showing up to work, and she would make these just absolutely just hard to understand mistakes that she was making, So it turns out later on, I found out, right? And I found out after I don't remember if we terminated her employment or she just decided to leave one day, or maybe both, but it was only after that point that I found out from someone else that this woman was, a drug addict. addict, right? And I didn't even know at the time. And you know, that's just talks about how addiction works, right? It's not that obvious all the time. And I am a former, you know, I am in recovery myself. So, you know, now of course when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have seen that. Yeah, that's a sign. But I didn't know at the time, right? And so one day, while you know, after this woman was terminated, or she decided to leave, right? Somebody broke in to the shop with a key, right? Now, I had never gotten the key back from her. She was one of the people who came in at 4 o'clock in the morning, so she had to have a key. And when she left, I mean, I never thought in a million years that she would do something like this. And I didn't know it was her at the time that we did get robbed. But somebody came in and took all of the tip money from the other employees and all of like the rolls of quarters that we had on hand. I mean, I didn't leave any cash in the register overnight, you know, but she stole all the stuff. And I only knew it was her because like, you know, like maybe 3 weeks after we got robbed, you know, I heard that she was arrested having robbed another place in a town next to ours, where she had worked, you know, after leaving me, and did the same thing. Like, she had the key, so she went in there and she just took everything that she could find, you know. And that's how it is with people who are feeding an addiction. You know, people become very, very desperate, you know. Now, at the time, right, I did not feel an abundance of forgiveness for this woman, right? I felt a lot of resentment for her, and I really was really not, you know, I was not the forgiving type at that point. And certainly for this woman, I was not willing to, because she stole from me and the people who work for me, and it was a really big deal. And at the time, I was really hurt by it, right? So 6 months or whatever goes by, maybe a year goes by. And one day, I'm sitting in a diner with my daughter, who at that time was probably about 5 years old or something like that. This is like 7 years ago or something like that. Oh no, it's 5 years, something like that. It was Facebook showed me this morning. So anyway, my daughter was 5 to 7 years old, something like that. And we were sitting at the diner, right? We were in a little window seat, and as I'm eating, sitting there eating my lunch with my daughter, I look and I notice there's the woman, right? And she's walking into the diner with her grandmother. Right? Now, again, for months, I was like, you know, how can I press charges against her? I went to the cops. They were like, no, your camera didn't pick up enough. You know, you can't see her face in the camera. You know, it's not high resolution enough. You're not going to be able to press charges. But I tried. Like, I was really, you know, I was angry at this woman. And it was something that it was gripping me, right? And so when I saw her that day, right, it kind of, and this was right around the time where I was starting to really practice mindfulness and compassion in earnest, right? I mean, it had been a couple of years, but I was really starting to gain some real steam with it, and really like focusing on it, and really trying to embody the compassion end of this practice, right? And so there was something about, you know, the way that I was feeling about it, and the fact that I was, you know, with my daughter, and you know, just all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with this feeling of compassion. And it started with the ability to forgive, right? And so all of a sudden, as I watched this woman who had hurt me so badly, right, and hurt others too, like, that's the thing, like, it's somebody who, you know, and then of course afterwards we're like, oh, remember when that other, you know, the rolls of quarters went missing? We couldn't figure out, it was probably her. You know, we kind of, you know, put it all together, and it turned out this woman was like probably stealing from us for a long time, and you know, she was, you know, who knows what else. You know, it's hard to, you know, anyway, I was feeling very angry about it at the time, right? But when I saw her walking in, for some reason, or not for some reason, for the reason of compassion and mindfulness and everything that I talk about here, I just got overwhelmed with this rush of love, right? And I realized in that moment, right, and I didn't know about the doctor in New Orleans at that time. I only researched about him a few years ago when I was coaching people on forgiveness. But I just got this overwhelming rush of knowledge and understanding that my hate and my anger was only going to produce more hate and more anger, and that the real answer was love. only love can overcome hate, right? Just like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, right? Like, that's the answer, right? We have to be able to break this cycle of anger and resentment and grudge and hate, right? And the only way to do that is through love. And so what I did, and this is the story that came up in Facebook this morning, what I did was I said, come on, my daughter and I were finished with our lunch, and so I said, come here for a second. I need to do something. Come here. And I walked over to the hostess station, and I saw where my former employee was sitting, and I was like, you see those two women over there, the younger one and the grandmother, I want you to tell me what they've ordered for lunch, and I want you to add the cost of their bill onto my bill, and I want to pay for their lunch, right? And of course, the woman, it was this time of year, right? So the woman thought it was probably just some kind of, Christmas thing that I was doing or whatever, but this is what it really was. It was me understanding that forgiveness is really what I need and what we all need, right? It's good for us. And the minute I did that, right? The minute I had this act, and it was courageous for me at the time, because you have this sense like, if I let go of this, I'm gonna fall or something bad is gonna happen, right? But as my own coach told me a couple of weeks ago, that the word forgiving, right? Think about what it is. It's forgiving. It's give it away. Like this thing that you're feeling here, just get rid of it. Get it out of you. Right? And that's it's not for keeping, it's for giving. And so I realized that in this just miraculous, beautiful moment of just understanding. And I was just so happy that my daughter was there so I could explain it to her. And I had this whole story, and I put it on Facebook, and I had one of my customers was a pastor, and so he came in and he was like, that is the most Christian thing I've heard in such a long time, and he thanked me for that. It was just such a beautiful, amazing feeling, the ability to just give it away, just get rid of the anger and the hate, right? Because again, all the anger and the hate in my heart was never going to undo what happened. Right? It wasn't like I could go over there and shake her down for the $50 that she stole from me, right? I would be arrested if I tried to do that, right? It's just not the way the world works, right? And so and even if it were, there's no, even if I were able to get that money back, it still wouldn't change that much. We'd all gotten past it. It'd been a year already. We forgot about the money. The money wasn't important, And so the idea of forgiveness is so important. And I want you to know that today. I wanted to share that story and all of these facts about forgiveness with you today, because maybe you're holding on to something yourself. Maybe somebody in your life has done something. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's an old friend who cheated on, whatever. Maybe something that happened in your past, right? Maybe it's one of your children. Maybe it's your parents. Maybe it's, something very small or very big, right? It doesn't really matter. It's the same concept, right? And so maybe there's someone who has done something wrong to you in your life, right? Or maybe you have done something wrong to someone else and you've never forgiven yourself for that. And so I invite you, if that is the case, I invite you to take a few moments today and close your eyes and just imagine, right? And don't even you don't have to contact the person, or you don't have to, there's nothing you have to perform to make this happen. It's something that happens on the inside, right? And so I want you to take a few moments today, and I want you to consider what would happen if you allowed yourself to forgive this person. Again, they don't have to know this. They don't have to hear about it. You don't have to call them. You don't have to send them a letter. Nothing. No emails, no e-cards, nothing. Just inside of yourself. See what happens. How does it feel to you to forgive them? To just let it go. Just unburden yourself from it. And I'm sure that if you do that, it's going to feel amazing to you. You're going to feel a lightness. You're going to feel like, wow, that feels so much better. Try it out. Really do. It won't take long. And you don't have to do anything special. Again, just sit and just imagine it. And then do it again. And then do it again. And see how many people in your life, including yourself, how many can you actually forgive? How many people can you give the gift of forgiveness to? Again, they don't have to know about it. Okay, it's not a weakness. It's not something where you're buckling under the pressure, or you're somehow, surrendering or forfeiting your rights or something like that. It's not like that. It's just for you. And see how it feels. And if you have trouble with this, and if you would like to know, if you would like to talk about how to actually do this, I could even guide you through a meditation to do it. And I would happily do that for you. Okay? Because the world needs more forgiveness, and I am a soldier in this war of compassion. Okay? And so I'm willing to do that for you. Okay, it won't cost you any money to have this talk. It won't cost you money to do the forgiveness or to learn about the forgiveness. So if you need help, please, I encourage you and I beg of you to reach out to me. Okay, you can go my website, book a call with me there. You can just send me an email. You can just comment below, send me a direct message, whatever it is. But get in touch with me. Let's talk about this, because you might be very, very surprised at how good it feels. And again, logically, if I didn't convince you yet, give me 5 more minutes to talk to you again, and I'll convince you logically how it makes sense to engage in forgiveness. All right? For you, not for them, for you. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I wish you well. I really appreciate you. And again, with all the YouTube stuff, do the like, do the share, do the comment, subscribe. And if you're interested in supporting this work that I do, Patreon, you can go to my Patreon page. Just look me up, Art Burns Coaching on Patreon. It's a very simple way to support people who are doing the work. And so if you'd like to do that, it's there for you. It's all set up. All right? Thanks so much, everybody. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.